This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
So everybody right now, think about a box where you feel held back, where you feel like you're not making progress. And so maybe it's in your relationship, maybe it's in your body, maybe it's in your bank account, maybe it's in your learning. There's three forces that keep you in that box. The first dimension is your mindset. The second circle is your motivation. Now, this is a big one. A lot of people associate motivation to motivational seminars where they get really excited and jump on chairs and they're like, oh, I'm gonna exercise tomorrow. That's it. I'm gonna quit my job. And they're quote unquote motivated, but what they really are is just excited. And so that's not the motivation I'm talking about. I'm talking about sustainable motivation. So our questions, a lot of times, they are formed through our expectations of others, through our own experience, through events that happen in our life. And so a lot of what Limitless is creating self-awareness, because how are you going to make a change in a limit if you're not even aware that it exists?
How did you rise above that to realize, oh, I can improve this, I can change this? We've got Jim Kwik once again on the podcast. Welcome, Jim. How are you doing?
So good to be back, James. Thank you, everybody who's listening. And yeah, let's get limitless.
Yeah, Jim, you wrote the ideal book like this. I don't know if you named it after the movie, but the book's called Limitless. It's one of my all-time favorite movies also, where basically Bradley Cooper takes this pill, this dream pill that's like, it makes him super smart. He writes like a novel in a weekend. He becomes a senator. He becomes a great investor. And you wrote a book kind of suggesting that these sort of capabilities are possible for any of us without the pill. The book's called Limitless. It subtitles Upgrade Your Brain, Learn Anything Faster, and Unlock Your Exceptional Life by Jim Kwik. And I like the blurb at the top. It's by Will Smith. Jim Kwik knows how to get the maximum out of me as a human being. Will Smith. First off, I have to ask about that. How did you run into Will Smith and get the most out of him?
Well,
he's a pretty amazing guy, right?
Yeah, he certainly is. For me, it happened through good fortune, and it. I don't seek any of these individuals out. We were at an event together, and he asked if I wanted to grab dinner. So it was me and Sir Ken Robinson and Simon Sinek.
Wow.
So it was quite a brain trust, and we connected. And then shortly after that, he flew me to Toronto to work on a superhero film that he was working on. And I help actors speed read scripts, memorize lines. He's an incredible performer, in life and like on screen and off screen. And it was a real honor. I learned as much with these individuals as maybe even more than they learned from me.
Well, and obviously we're going to talk about Limitless because I want to unlock my brain's potential so I could be like that guy in the movie. But Will Smith strikes me as someone who has this outrageous, over-the-top charisma. Like I've never met him or seen him in person, but I imagine he's the type of person who walks into a room and everyone knows it.
Well, he certainly doesn't have to introduce himself at all, but he has an energy for sure. I believe the life you live are the lessons you teach. And I remember we spent the day together. He was shooting a night shoot for a Suicide Squad and shooting from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And everyone thinks that Hollywood is very glamorous, but it is very, very not. It's, that phrase, hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
But we had spent the entire day together in Toronto, and we were just brainstorming and geeking out over human potential. And we went through this exercise where we discovered, you've read before, we talk about in the book that the average person has about 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. And there's certain thoughts that they have more than others, and they come in the form of questions. And those questions determine your focus and your reality. And we found out that, you have your dominant questions. You have dominant questions you ask more than any other question. And we found out his was, how do I make this moment more magical? How do I make this moment more magical? And I believe questions really are the answer. If you read something and forget what you just read, or you can't retain things, I feel like we're not asking enough questions, because if you ask enough questions, you get enough answers. And, we actually improved upon it because we asked a meta question, like, how do we make that question even, more powerful? And he was like, well, let's make it, how do I make this moment even more magical? Just adding that word even presupposes the moment is already magical. And that's his thought process. And if he's asking that all the time, he's getting answers all the time. And so, I remember we were shooting at night. His family was there. I was Toronto in the wintertime. It was freezing. It was like 2 a.m. and we're all like shivering. And he starts, we're just watching these screens and waiting for them to set up the next shoot. And he starts bringing everyone blankets, and he makes hot chocolate for everybody. And he starts cracking jokes and telling stories, but he was living that dominant question. How do I make this moment even more magical? And he's known for his charisma. He's known for his, his sense of presence. And I remember actually in a more recent movie that I was on set for, it's called Gemini Man, where he's being hunted. He's the world's greatest assassin, and he's being hunted by somebody who's better than him. And it's like, you find out it's like a younger version of him.
Oh, I remember the trailers for that.
Yes. And we were actually in his trailer, the two of us were having lunch, and I was asking him, he had just gotten on social media. He had just announced it like maybe a week or two before on his Instagram account on Ellen. I think it was on the Ellen show. And I asked him, like, why'd you start social media after all this time? And he said that, Jim, most of the time when people see me on screen, everything I'm saying is scripted, and I have a lot more to say than somebody writing for me. And he wanted to have a voice and be creative and, make these moments even more magical. And it was amazing. But just a reminder that, we all have dominant questions. We all have a set of questions that we ask more than anything else. And be conscious of it. And so my question for everybody who's listening is, what do you think your dominant question is? Because whatever it is, you're constantly focused on that. And because you're focused on it, it'll explain how you feel. A lot of the times it'll explain our behaviors. And also, what do you think the questions are of the people around you, like your spouse? It'd be interesting to find out what their dominant question is, because it would explain a lot of why they do what they do. What do you think the dominant questions of your teammates are, or your children are?
Is everybody's dominant question different, or do you find a lot of people have a kind of blasé one, like, how can I just make more money? Or like, what do you think? How do you find your dominant question?
Yeah, I would say that, thinking, first of all, is the process of, functionally, I think the process of thinking is asking and answering questions of yourself. And if somebody is saying to themselves, is that true? You notice you had to ask a question to think about it. And so my question, for example, actually, let's go through how to do this. Let me give you another example. I have a friend, and we found out her dominant question, the question she asks all the time, is, how do I get people to like me? How do I get more people to like me? How do I get this person to like me? Some iteration of being liked. And you don't know how old she is. You don't know what she looks like. You don't know where she lives. You don't know her job. You don't know, her state of health or her ethnicity, but you know a lot about her. What's her personality like if she's asking all the time, or what's her life like if she's asking, how do I get people to like me?
And given that you find, let's say that was someone's dominant question, and they realize that and they're unhappy with it, they realize that could lead to a lot of unhappiness.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about, how do you go about finding your dominant question, but then how do you go about switching it?
Yeah. Just to extrapolate a little bit here, like, you could suppose if she's asking herself, how do I get people to like me? Just so people see the impact is, she martyrs herself all the time, and she's always giving of herself. People take advantage of her all the time. Her personality shifts depending on who she's spending time with. It's like a chameleon, because she's always getting that person to, try to be like that person. So she's liked. And so all these things about her, and one question. And so how do you discover your dominant question? Well, most dominant questions come at some early age. Something in the environment usually sparks it. So for example, for me, I had the head injury. We've talked about this on your show in the past. When I was 5 years old in kindergarten. I had a bad fall and had a head trauma, a traumatic brain injury, and it led to a number of processing, learning difficulties. And at the age of 9, someone pointed to me, a teacher said, "That's the boy with the broken brain." And, that label became my limit. Talk about being limitless. When you're thinking about what area, and when I'm talking about limitless, let me preface this. When I, even my teachers would have been surprised I read a book, much less wrote this book. That label put me in that box. And as we're talking about this conversation, I want people to just think about where they're in a box, where they're not making progress in their life, where they feel like they're being held back, where they feel like they're not advancing. And so for me, it was learning. That was a big issue for me, because every single time I wasn't picked for sports or I did badly on a quiz, I would always say, "Oh, it's because I'm broken." And that became my limitation. But my dominant question was, how do I fix this? Because someone who's broken and looks at themselves as broken, one of the obvious questions was, how do I fix this? How do I make this better?
So a lot of people who have such a limit, who are told all the time, like, that's the boy with the broken brain, they tend to believe it, and they tend to live their life because, like you said, you can excuse a lot of things. Oh, I got a bad test grade because I have a broken brain, or, forgive me for doing this. I'm the kid with the broken brain. How did you rise above that to realize, oh, I can improve this, I can change this?
Well, and we'll talk about the limitless model in this conversation and the 3-part framework, but I was highly motivated to change it. I had my parents immigrated here. My father was 13 years old. He didn't speak the language. He came here because his parents had both died, and, when he was 13 years old, a lot of poverty, a lot of challenges, and they couldn't afford to feed him. So he left, came here to the States, and left his younger brother and sister behind, lived with his aunt. And his question has always been, how do I keep the family together? That was his thing. And so family, I grew up with these values of family is most important, because though that experience that he went through at a young age, 13, shaped his thoughts. Right. And so he was always thinking, how do I keep the family together? Because he had lost his family. And that became his dominant question. And so our questions, a lot of times, they are formed through the expectations of others, through our own experience, through events that happen in our life. And one of the ways of identifying it, a number of ways, you could just be conscious and self-aware of your inner talk. First of all, notice that when you're in situations where your mind goes, you could be quiet and be silent. You could meditate, you could journal and see what those dominant thoughts are. And so a lot of what Limitless is creating self-awareness, because how are you going to make a change in a limit if you're not even aware that it exists? And I find that the big limits fall in 3 categories. But you're right. You can absolutely, first way of understanding what yours is to be aware of it. And so through some kind of process, either being tuned into your thoughts, talk therapy with a therapist, journaling, you'll see themes.
Or maybe to even a shortcut to that might be tune into your excuses. So if someone says, "Well, why'd you get a C on that test?" and you could say, "Well, I have a broken brain," or "Why didn't you buy that bigger house?" "Well, I don't have enough money." You could start to see what your excuses are, and those are you could decide whether they're real hurdles or whether they're things that you could start with the assumption that all hurdles can be overcome and work back from that.
I agree completely. In the book, under mindset, there are 3 sections of the book, 3 parts of the model, and I identify these as lies. That there are 7 lies to learning. Because the book focuses on limits, and the framework could be applied towards accelerated learning, or it could be a framework for unlocking our true potential. And it sounds kind of grandiose, but when I walk through it, it's extremely practical. But you're right. First thing is to be aware of it. And these questions, just know that if you ask the question, why can't I lose this weight? Or why am I so stupid? You're going to set that part of your brain, the reticular activating system, RAS, towards that answer. And you're always going to find evidence to back that up. So if I'm asking, like, why am I so stupid? I'll be like, oh, here's evidence. Here's some evidence. Here's some reason. And I always tell people who come to me all the time, at events. They say, Jim, I have a horrible memory. I'm too old. I'm not smart enough. And I say, stop. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. Dr. Daniel Amen, who's a brain doctor here in the States, he's done over 175 brain scans. He calls them ants. Ants. Kill those ants. Automatic negative thoughts. I always tell people that your brain is like this incredible supercomputer and your self-talk is a program it will run. So if you tell yourself, I'm not good at X, I'm not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to. And so to be mindful, a lot of the onus on becoming limitless is having this fundamental belief that you and I have talked about, that you are responsible, that, maybe we are a product of our past and the people around us and our education, everything that's happened to us, our circumstances up to this point. But we are in control and we are responsible for who we are today and who we are tomorrow. And part of being responsible is be responsible not only for our actions around other people, but also our thoughts, our habitual thoughts, our habitual emotions that we experience. But number one, own yourself. And you talk a lot about this, and own your conversations. Like if you have these thoughts, know that we are the ones that are having these thoughts.
Well, let me ask you a question. Like one time I was like dead broke and miserable, and I was saying to myself, why does this always happen to me? Like, why am I always
Ooh.
going broke? And I thought I was smart, and I would say like to myself, I'm smart. Like, why is this happening to me? And my real only answer was, I don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
I think saying I don't know is also a good way to at the very least not have an excuse, because I didn't really know. If I knew, I wouldn't have gone broke over and over again. But if I said, oh, I'm just stupid or
True.
whatever, or I'm just bad with money or blah blah blah, then like you just said, I would have established my limit. I think also allowing yourself to not know things about yourself is a good way to understand where the limits are, or at least to open up the limitless possibility.
I agree. The studies done on self-compassion state that when you beat yourself up and you're hard on yourself for not working out that day, or eating some bad food that day, or fill in the blank, that people think that if they're hard on themselves and beat themselves up, mentally, that they are more likely to follow through. But studies on self-compassion say the opposite, that when you're kind with yourself, when you say, hey, I'm human, there are lots of stuff going on in the world and it's okay, then you're more likely to follow through in the future. But I think that we need to be conscious of our thoughts and responsible for them. And it's not easy. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm just saying it's pretty straightforward. And it's that simple, but it's also that difficult to be aware of our thoughts, and then that thoughts, could have an influence on how we feel. If we're always thinking that we're not enough, or we're thinking, why am I always broke? That, it can lead to plateaus, or it can lead to problems. At the best case, it's like the answer is, I don't know. But what if we reformulated that question for, how do I grow my income and add value in the world? Then you're going to start getting a different quality of answer. How do I add value in the world, get paid for it, and enjoy the process? You're going to come up with a different answer for that. And I would say that we could train ourselves, just like how those questions or those thoughts got there to begin with. We could introduce new thought, just like we could introduce new habits of doing. And, like let's say you don't floss. There's a process for just learning, getting a new habit of flossing. We talk about, creating and breaking habits in the book a lot, because first you create your habits and then your habits create you. But it's starting with, I own my thoughts, I am responsible for them, and I could change it. Because if you don't have a belief that you could change it, then it's nice to be able to add some doubt in it. Like, is that true? Is this belief that I have the thing that, and it's not about so much, is it true or not? It's more like, for me, is it useful? Is this belief useful for me? Does it
Yeah,
serve me?
I think useful, not useful is a really good, even practice. Like if listeners just try this for like 5 minutes, like what are some common things you believe to be true or things that you're angry about, and just be open-minded, like asking yourself, is this a useful thought to think or a not useful thought? Like, will I grow from this or benefit from this
Hmm.
or not? Just practice that a couple of minutes a day, and I think you get better at it. And until you realize later on when you're thinking about something, oh, that's not useful.
And it happens. You could use it throughout the day. I mean, you could write these questions down on your refrigerator or on your phone and have alarms go off and just start training yourself. It's interesting. On a total tangent, I'm doing a little bit of study on lucid dreaming and this state. Have you ever had a dream and you know that you're aware that you're dreaming?
Yeah. It's not too common for me, but I've definitely had it. Like then you can, it's sort of like this state you're almost, I feel like it happens when you're near to being awake, but you're not awake. And then you can do what you want in the dream.
Yeah, I believe that there's always a method behind magic. Like one of the 7 lies to learning that I document, and I talk about all of them, the big ones, like you only use 10% of your brain, or intelligence is fixed, or genius is born. Genius is born it's it's a complete lie. Certainly we have certain tendencies and traits, but genius can be built also. And so lucid dreaming, there's a method behind the magic. Some people do it naturally. And the benefits of lucid dreaming, as I'm studying it, just introductory right now, because I like to learn something, new every month or so. I'm experimenting with it because we'll spend about 20 years of our life sleeping, about 3 to 5 years dreaming. And what if we could transform those 3 to 5 years of dreaming and become lucid? And then you could actually use that time where you're aware that you're dreaming to experiment, to learn, to face fears. They're using lucid dreaming to, let's say you're afraid of snakes, and you could use a dream state when you know you're safe, but you could train yourself and to be more habitualized to whatever it is that you fear, so you can make it more comfortable.
What's the best way to trigger a lucid
And
dream?
here's the thing, going back to the power of questions, one of the ways of triggering a lucid dream is throughout the day, ask yourself this dominant question: is this a dream? Like 100 times a day, ask yourself, is this a dream? Is this a dream? Is this a dream? Like, have you ever had the experience where you had to wake up early the next morning, some ridiculous time at 4:30 to catch a flight or something, and you're thinking about it at night, and you set your alarm, and you end up waking up like 1 minute or 2 minutes right before the alarm goes off?
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, that's the power of the human mind. And what if, for me, my nighttime rituals, and in the book I talk about my evening rituals, my morning rituals, because again, first you create your habits, and your habits create you. Before I go to bed, I introduce a question that I just think about. I don't obsess about it because I want to fall asleep, but I just kind of, as I'm meditating, falling asleep, I ask myself a question that I want my mind just to think about. And then I find with an amazing amount of accuracy that I actually spend some time on that, because your brain doesn't shut off at night. And so if I'm asking myself throughout the day, is this a dream? Is this a dream? Is this a dream? And then all of a sudden, the first time the answer is yes, then you're in a lucid dream, right? And then you're aware of it, and then you could use it to your advantage. Sometimes before I go to sleep, I'll ask myself a question that I'm just facing. It's maybe a challenge or something I want to be able to solve, or just an adventure I want to take in my dreams. And that same power that makes somebody wake up almost minutes to the wake up time on their alarm clock, they could use to be creative, to come up with problems. I mean, we've talked about this in the past, that, a part of the book, I talk about how to remember your dreams, because when you research it, you find that a lot of inventions and works of art and literature came from dream states. Like Mary Shelley came up with, Frankenstein in a dream. A chemist came up with
I didn't know that.
a chemist came up with the framework of the periodic table in his dream, because they're just working all day, and your brain doesn't shut off at night. If anything, it's more active, and it's usually focused on the thing that was most dominant that day. So entrepreneurs that are focused on something, or students that are learning all day, and when you're dreaming is when you consolidate short to long-term memory. Sleep, clean plaque that leads to brain aging challenges, but also you could come up with, Paul McCartney came up with the song Yesterday in his dream. Jack Nicklaus was in a slump with his golf game. He was shooting like high 70s, and he was obsessed about it. And in his dream, he actually had a dream where he shifted his grip just slightly, and he woke up just very inspired, this kind of eureka. He went on the course and then shot mid 60s. I mean, did extremely well. And that's the power of our dreams. But this is an illustration, again, If people truly understood how powerful their mind is, they'd be very careful with their thoughts. Not that you have one negative thought and it ruins your life any more than eating that one jelly donut's going to ruin your life, but consistently, you could, it's not right or wrong. It's just like, hey, are these thoughts serving me in this moment?
It's interesting to view thoughts as like a diet. Like, you're consuming thoughts. And
We are.
if you have strong thoughts all the time, like, oh, I hate this person, or why is that person got more money than me, or blah, blah, blah. That's what you're consuming. That's the thoughts you're feeding your mind.
And it's not necessarily, again, it's whether it's true or not. Are these compulsive or repetitive thoughts? Are they
Right.
serving me? Are they serving my goals, my outcomes, the things that I want in life? Or are they holding me back? And so if you're asking questions like, why am I always broke? Or why am I never enough? Or, and then, I mean, that's innovation and creativity. A lot of it is asking new questions. It's like, I read this book years ago called The Structure of Scientific Revolution that said that the majority of innovation comes from people outside the industry. Like it's in Elon Musk looking at the automotive industry because they ask a different question. They ask a question like, well, if I wanted to create a car with today's technology, not just incrementally, just based on the current, way of doing it, how would I do it fresh? And then all of a sudden you come up with a different answer. Like Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1, is it's a whole bunch of set of frameworks and mental models and questions as, if I had to reach my 10-year goal, but I only had 6 months to do it, what would I do? How would I do it? How would I go about doing it? Because you can't have like this incremental growth, additive in the book. He's talking about like going from 1 to 2 is just additive, or 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, but going from 0 where there's nothing to 1 where there is something, you have to ask a new question. And so how do I, whatever your outcome is, go back and engineer a question that serves you? Like for again, Will was, how do I make this moment even more magical? I mean, it was originally, how do I make this moment more magical? And then we were like, how do we make it better? How do we make this moment even more magical? Presuming it's already in a magical moment.
And what's an example in your life where reframing the questions you were asking yourself kind of, was a big change in your life?
Yeah. So my initial question when I felt like I was broken going through school was, how do I be less noticeable? That was my dominant question, because when you have learning challenges and you get called on once and you don't know the answer and you feel pain or fear, you're scared, that formed a question like, how do I shrink down? How do I not be called on in class? And it would totally, in elementary school, dominate my behavior, because I would sit behind, the big kid in class. So I'd be, shrinking down so I wouldn't be seen and called on. I would be always trying to think of the question. My question was, how do I become invisible? And it would affect everything in my life. It was always not being seen. Now, ultimately, did I want to be seen? Probably. I think most people want to be seen. Most people want to be heard. But when you feel like you're broken, it's not something that you want the spotlight to highlight, everything
Sure.
that's wrong with you. And so I had this, but later on, you get tired of it, and you start wondering, get curious, which is a nice place to start with anything, getting curious about something, getting curious about your financial situation, or getting curious why, your relation you tend to date the same kind of people, or getting curious about a health condition and why certain things, maybe it's the food we're eating, maybe it's just, what we're attracted to and what our actions or habits are leading to. So later on, I got sick and tired of just being like, nervous and, scared all the time. And I started to see people succeed because I was working 3 times harder as everybody else with my brain injury to get worse grades. I started asking, hey, what is that person doing to do so well in school? And not have to like pull these all-nighters. And so it changed my questions from, now my questions are like, how do I make this better? How do I learn this? How do I teach this to other people? And those dominant questions have lead my day. How do I light up a billion brains? It's a different kind of question.
What was like the first, when you started going down this path of, now you're obviously like a sort of a coach where you teach these principles to many well-known people, and I'm so glad you finally have written this down in a book, the Limitless book. But what was one of the first skills you started to learn and have that you really felt excited, like you felt yourself improving and you got that kind of dopamine fix that,
Yeah.
oh, I'm really learning this. I'm smart. I'm getting smarter. This is happening.
It was like when I was 18, so I struggled from the age of 5 all through middle school, junior high, high school, got into a local college, community like school. And I thought freshman meant you could make a fresh start. And I took all these classes. And my motivation, again, we're going to talk about that as being part of the framework for learning faster and achieving anything, was I wanted to make my family proud. You know, I'm the oldest of 3 kids. Parents, you know, we grew up in the back of a laundromat that my mom worked at. My grandmother, you know, was my caregiver because my parents had so many different jobs, working so hard. She raised me, and you know, she ended up passing of Alzheimer's, and those shaped my questions about memory and brain health, right, in terms of my focus and my concern. But when I was 18, I really wanted to make my parents proud. But I started to do worse, and I wanted to quit. And a friend said, "Hey, before you tell your parents you're going to quit school, that could be pretty devastating. Why don't you? I'm going home this weekend. Why don't you come with and get some perspective?" And I think this is so important for us. If we feel limited in a box, we feel like we're held back. Part of it is our point of view, and just changing your perspective. And for me, a change of perspective, an easy way of doing it is changing where I am, like a place, go for a walk or go on, on a trip upstate, or get some perspective on the problem, maybe some space and some distance. But the other thing is being around different people, because the people you spend time with, we start adapting and adopting a lot of their self-talk and their language and their words, the same phrases that they use. And then we start, you've heard this, we become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. That if you spend time with 9 broke people, be careful, because you're on your way to be number 10, because we're constantly adapting ourselves around with our surroundings. And so I agree to go to visit his family, and his father is, they're pretty wealthy, very different than the way I grew up. And the father walks me around his property before dinner, asks me a question. And the question was, "Jim, how's school?" And that's the worst question you could ask me. And I just start bawling to this complete stranger because I was holding so much emotionally in. And I tell him my whole story, broken brain, ready to quit school, disappointed my parents, don't know what to tell them. And he was like, "Stop, Jim, why are you in school?" Like, nobody's ever asked me that question. I just assume everybody just goes to school, right? All my friends were, and I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, that's what you're supposed to do, right? He was like, "Well, why are you in school? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? What do you want to share?" 4 questions, right? Because the questions change your focus. Because at any given time, there's 1 billion stimuli we could be paying attention to. So primarily your brain is a deletion device. It's trying to keep information out, because you'll go crazy if you were just inundated with and drowning information all the time. So your brain trying to keep it out. What gets in are the things you ask questions about. That's the filtering system. And so he asked me questions like, "What do you want to be, do, have, share, give?" And I had no answers. Because nobody's ever asked me that question. If you never ask yourself that question, you don't have a lot of answers. And so I start pondering these questions and thinking about what I want to be, do, have. And I started answering him, and he says, "Stop." And he pulls out a piece of paper out of his, he's carrying like a notebook, and he tears out a couple sheets, makes me write it down, which I think also is an important practice. One of the best ways to create in the world, as a writer, is to take things that are in your head and put them out on paper, because all of a sudden you've taken something invisible to the world and you made it visible right in front of you, and it helps you to reflect on it and organize your thoughts. And all of a sudden, after I don't know how much time, I wrote, a couple pages of things I wanted to be, do, have, share, give, whatever. And I start folding up the sheets to put in my pocket, and he grabs them out of my hand. And I'm freaking out, because I've never shared. I didn't even realize some of these things are things I wanted, right? Because I've never really focused on it. And, he's looking at my dreams and my goals that I've never really shared with anyone, including myself. And I'm nervous because I'm very insecure, 18-year-old. And he's looking at me. He's like, "Jim, you're this close to everything on that list." And he spreads his index fingers about a foot apart. And I'm thinking, no way, give me 10 lifetimes. I'm not going to crack that list. And he takes his two fingers and puts them to the side of my head, meaning what's in between, my brain is the key to have everything on that list. And he takes me into a room of his home that I've never seen before. It's wall to wall, ceiling, floor, covered in books. Like I've never been in a library in somebody's house before. And honestly, I've never read a book cover to cover. And it took me an extra 3 years to learn how to read with my brain injury. And so it's like being in a room full of snakes. Like I'm very, very uncomfortable. And what makes it worse is he starts going to these shelves and handing me these snakes. and I started looking at these titles of these books, and there are these biographies of men and women in history and some early personal growth books. Those Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking,
Power of Positive Thinking.
Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends, all these books, right? And I've never seen any of these books before. And he's like, Jim, I want you to read one book a week. He says, leaders or readers, I want you to read one book a week. And I'm thinking, have you not listened to everything I just told you? I have learning challenges. I have all this schoolwork and I have the broken. He's like, stop, hold on for a second. He's like, and I said, schoolwork. He said, don't let school get in the way of your education, right? A famous I didn't know, this is over 25 years ago. I didn't know it was a Mark Twain quote. And I'm like, wow, that's really profound. And I'm like, still, I can't commit to doing this because, again, we didn't grow up in my family. They weren't the wealthiest by any stretch or the smartest or the most spiritual or the healthiest wellness, but they just really good people. And I won the lottery there. I feel like they're just very kind. They work really hard. They do what they say. And I'm like, I'm not going to commit to reading one book a week because I can't do that. And then very smart man, he reaches into his pocket and he still has my bucket list. And he starts reading every single one of my dreams or goals out loud. And I don't know, James, something about hearing your deepest desires, being said in somebody else's voice, out loud into the universe. It just messed with my mind and my soul, something fierce. And truthfully, a lot of the things on that list were things I wanted to do for my family, things they could never afford, even if they had the money, which they didn't. They could never afford, they would never do for themselves. And that was part of my reasons for, working so hard and I'm pushing myself so hard. And with that leverage and that motivation, that purpose, I agreed to read one book a week. Now that's, by the way, is so important. That's why I want to just underscore this and really emphasize that knowing what motivates you is so important in life, because a lot of us are detached emotionally. We know the reasons, but we don't feel the reasons with the benefits of working out or the consequences if we don't work out or eat the right foods or work on our business or something like that. And we could talk about the formula, but with that leverage, I agreed to read one book a week. And so fast forward, I'm back at school. I have a pile of books I have to read for midterms and a pile of books I promised to read. And I already couldn't get through pile A, right? I don't have the time. These are my self-talk. I don't have the time. I'm not smart enough. And so what do? I don't do anything I don't eat. I don't sleep. I don't work out. I don't see people. I don't friends, socialize. I just live in the library because I'm just, I have to lead up, fulfill my commitment. And I can't sustain it. And after weeks of doing that, I just pass out one day in the library, in late night, and out of sheer exhaustion, I fall down a flight of stairs again. I hit my head again, and I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. And at this time, I'm wasting away.
You were in a coma for 2 days after that?
I woke up 2 days later, like almost 2 days later. I was down to something like 117 pounds. I mean, I was wasting away. It was the darkest time of my life. I mean, I thought I died. And I think part of me wished I had, I would never, because for the reasons of, my family, I would never want that. But I didn't know what else to do. Because what do you do when you work on something for years and years and years and there's no improvement? And it was like hopeless. And I just thought there had to be a better way. I was hooked up to all these IVs and, I was dehydrated. And the nurse came in when I said there has to be a better way, came in with a mug, and on it was a picture of Albert Einstein, a genius, the opposite of what I thought I was. But this saying you've heard before, his quote that was on the mug said something like, the same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem. The same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem. And it made me ask a new question, going back to the power of questions and our thoughts. And what's my problem? My real problem is I'm a really slow learner. I have a slow brain. And I was like, well, how do I think differently about it? Well, maybe I can learn how to learn faster. That's literally what I said to myself. And I was like, okay, new question. How do I learn how to learn faster? And I was like, oh, obviously school. So I asked the nurse for a course bulletin to look at courses for next semester. And I start flipping through all the pages, looking for classes on how to learn better. And there were all classes on what to learn: math, history, science, Spanish, important classes on what to learn, but there were zero classes on how to learn those things, right? How to study it, how to remember it, how to focus, concentrate, how to read it better, how to, think about it, all that stuff. And I became obsessed with those questions. And I set my studies aside and I start studying the mind, the power of the mind. I wanted to solve this one question. How does my brain work so I could work my brain? That was my dominant question. How does my brain work so I could work my brain? How does my memory work so I could work my memory? And I set my books aside because I obviously wasn't making progress there. And I started studying this other stack of books on personal growth. And I got introduced to, positive thinking. And I started learning about accelerated learning and, started studying a little bit more about the brain. And when I started to study my brain, I was started getting more confidence because I was like, wow, the brain's pretty amazing. And I started studying different multiple intelligence theory and adult learning theory and a little bit about psychology. And I got introduced to ancient mnemonics and, the memory palace. And I found a book randomly about speed reading. Just remember, because these things are always there, but you're not paying attention to them, right? It's part of the billion stimuli that you're putting out, you're filtering out of your life. But when I started asking the right questions, I started seeing answers everywhere. And that's my concern right now with the world. When there's a lot of media is talking, really focusing us on what's threatening and fear-based, that our mind tends to go there and it starts deleting everything else, opportunity and what you can be grateful for. And, so there is a physical, we have to practice, as we talked about before, physical hygiene, but also mental hygiene. We have to stand guard to our mind, just like feeding our body with good food. You want to feed your brain with podcasts and books and things that kind of counterbalance, everything else that could potentially be dark.
That's a really good point, that mental hygiene is important. And I always tell people, just don't even listen to the news, because the news has an agenda. If the news's agenda was just, let's give this person all the information about the day, that would be one thing. But their agenda also is to sell newspapers and make money. And so they manipulate a little your feelings in order to get you to buy a newspaper. So that's not totally equal to the agenda of let's inform you on everything that's going on.
Right. The media, as we know, is a business, and their product is use your attention. So whether it's television or anything else, they're selling commercials based on you paying, spending time there.
Right.
And we know that the famous saying in media that if it bleeds, it leads. That if they say tune in at 7:00 or you're going to die, your survival, your brain is wired for survival, and it's going to got to pay attention. And I'm okay with people knowing what's going on so we can make good decisions. But there's a difference between being aware of what's going on and also just obsessing about it all the time, because then that's all we see. We don't see everything else. And chronic fear, people don't realize this. Chronic stress shrinks your brain. That is a fact. And chronic fear compromises your immune system, so it makes you more susceptible to colds and flus and viruses. And so part of being healthy is not just feeding yourself good food and getting good sleep, it's lowering your stress and focusing on things that you could control. So you can't necessarily control what's going on with the health of the world, but you can control your own well-being, or at least influence it. You can't control maybe the world economics, but you could control your own finances and your decisions, around money, for instance. But that's a big part, is always coming back to, I feel like if there's one lesson I wish I could instill in myself early on, like if I could implant it on, is that I am 100% responsible for my life. Because whether it's true or not, again, I feel like that, that I've said this in your previous episode, that when I took Stan Lee out to dinner, it was just, he said, with great power comes great responsibility. And I flipped it. I was like, yeah. And with great responsibility comes great power. And most people, they don't want the responsibility because they feel like it's a burden, when actually claiming responsibility for where you are in life, it gives you power to make it better.
It's such a great point. I'm glad you mentioned it again. And so now So obviously, I mean, every human has the potential for great responsibility, or many humans do, most humans do. And what did you start? Okay, so how can I start? I would
Mhm.
like to be limitless. Like, what are the first things I can do? By the way, also, I'm just so people listeners know, we're Jim and I are doing this on Zoom. Jim's got like 1,000 books behind him. Have you read those books?
I read most books because for me, I don't want it to be just shelf help. I want it to be real self help. And
Yeah,
reading
I like that self help versus self
reading
help.
for me, I have to read 45 minutes a day. It's just ingrained into me. I just feel like if someone like you has decades of experience in something and you put it into a book, and I could read that book, somebody could read that book in a few days or a week. You could download decades into days. And
Yeah,
and it's also great mental exercise. I love podcasts. I love audiobooks. We publish a podcast our own I love that, but it's not as active as even when people are tested on audio or when they're reading, they'll do better on comprehension and retention off of reading something as opposed to listening to it.
really.
One of the reasons why, which I think everyone could appreciate, is usually when we're listening to something, we're usually doing something else. We're
Mm.
working out, we're driving, we're cleaning our house. And so, we're a little distracted also. As opposed to when we're reading, we're more active and we're not trying to read and do something else. Um,
Yeah, I always call reading is like being a vampire because, like you said, someone's spent decades learning something, and I get to download the most
yeah.
important parts of those decades into my body, in just like a few hours.
It's the greatest advantage somebody could have. Plus, it's great mental exercise. Reading is to your mind what exercises the body, and I can't imagine going a day without reading. I have that. I did an Insta story with Will Smith, and I in that trailer that time, and I was like, what are the two things you do for your mind that keeps you like like this performer? He was like, every single day I have to run and I have to read. I was like, wow, that's interesting. He has to do something physical every day, and he has to do something mental every day. And so I'm a big believer that leaders are readers. That actually how I bonded and connected, because people don't ask this, but when they see pictures of me and Oprah or Elon or Bill Gates, we connected over books. And I know, and also people don't. Another reason to read fiction books, because like most books, a lot of people in our communities, various communities, they read just nonfiction. But I would invite people to read a little fiction, maybe at nighttime or just a little bit each day, because it actually has been shown to enhance creativity, emotional intelligence, empathy. When you're seeing
Well,
something from somebody else's point of view.
I mean, I totally agree with that. I think fiction is good to read because there's an important difference between fiction and nonfiction. Nonfiction is usually written by people who are experts in a domain, and now they're writing about that domain in a book. Fiction is often written by really great writers.
Yeah.
So you actually read really great writing when you read. It's hard for a nonfiction person to also be a great writer. They can be good writers, but probably not great, fantastic writers.
Mhm.
Whereas if you read, I'll just do a classic example, but like Ernest Hemingway, that's someone who spent 40 years learning the craft of writing. So he's going to have a different style of writing than the average nonfiction writer. It's going to be, and he's going to be able to communicate emotions and settings and story in a different way than a nonfiction writer. Not that nonfiction writers are bad. It's just a different art form.
Completely. I didn't even think about it that way, but there's definitely an art and a science to writing, and so
Yeah.
it's really powerful. But coming back to how to become limitless, the first part, it would start with your mindset. So there's three parts. I want everybody to, as they're listening to this, to grab a pen and paper if you can, and just write this down, draw it out, and basically what we're drawing is a Venn diagram. And if you can't absolutely draw it out, just imagine in your mind. Imagine three circles, like it looks like Mickey Mouse, two ears intersecting and a head. That's all of them are overlapping each other, right? Three circles, Venn diagram. And then the top left is your mindset. And so what's your mindset? Those are the assumptions and attitudes you have about something. Your mindset is like the attitudes and assumptions you have about the world, about how things work, your attitudes and assumptions about yourself. What would fall in that circle are things that would be relevant for this. What do you believe is possible would fall underneath that, your mindset. What you believe you're capable of would fall underneath that mindset. What you
So what would be an example? Like, I'm just trying to think
Mhm.
for me, what am I capable of? Like, I know I'm capable of writing a book, for instance. I'm
Mhm.
probably not capable of being a professional basketball player, but that's too extreme. But what would be a reasonable thing for me to put there?
Something like that, like something around what you're capable of. Like I'm capable of remembering X. Like the book is a book on accelerated learning. So the examples that I use are to help people to learn faster. So one capability would be like I am capable or not capable of learning another language, or I am bad at math. That would be like something that would be in their believability, what's possible, what they're capable of. Some people feel like they can't dance, right? So that would be a mindset issue. So they can learn, like the third circle is methods, the how to. So they can learn how to remember names or how to salsa. But if their mindset is, they can know what the method is, but if their mindset is, I'm a horrible dancer, you know what I mean? Or I have a horrible memory, that's going to keep you in that box. So everybody right now, think about a box where you feel held back, where you feel like you're not making progress. And so maybe it's in your relationship, maybe it's in your body, maybe it's in your bank account, maybe it's in your learning. There's three forces that keep you in that box. It's three dimensions, right? Three-dimensional box. The first dimension is your mindset. And so some people believe that they're not capable of focusing. They believe they're not good with numbers, right? That's just their belief, their mindset. And so they could have the great methods taught by the greatest instructor, and it would still keep them in that box because that mindset. The second circle is your motivation. Now, this is a big one because when I say motivation, it is a loaded word. A lot of people associate motivation to, I don't know, motivational seminars where they get really excited and jump on chairs and they're like, oh, I'm gonna exercise tomorrow. That's it. I'm gonna quit my job. I'm gonna go out and start dating again. And they're quote unquote motivated, but what they really are is just excited. And then the next day comes and it's just back to whatever the level set is. And so that's not the motivation I'm talking about. I'm talking about sustainable motivation, that when Bradley Cooper took that pill, he had a surge of motivation. But when that pill wore off 24 hours later, not very motivated, right? And so
Right.
how do you have sustainable motivation? What I did was I did a thought experiment. I took my 28 years of field experience working with children to see if they're motivated, to seniors, to athletes, Olympic athletes, and actors, people just performing at different levels. And I did this thought experiment saying, okay, if I was to build the ultimate motivated human being, their motivation just never falters, what would I have to install into this person? And I was like, okay, first of all, this is the formula. P times E times S3 is the formula for sustained motivation. And I'll walk everyone through it. P times E times S3. This is the formula for overcoming procrastination. This is the formula for having unlimited drive, right?
Okay, I'm gonna need this because I have a book I have to finish in the next week.
Perfect. So the P stands for purpose. Okay, so your purpose, you don't have to, here's a lie, right? Because we're all about lies. Again, limited, idea, entertained. It's not necessarily true. It's just an idea we give energy to. We're entertaining it as if it is true. Some people have believe that motivation is you have to enjoy. Okay, let's back up. The proof that someone is motivated is not what they say or even how they feel. The truth is you can only tell if someone's motivated if they're acting, right? Otherwise, they're not motivated. They can say whatever they're saying, but if they're not doing that thing, they're not motivated. So that's the evidence. Now, in order for somebody to be motivated, you first need a P, which is purpose. And there's a lie that says that, let's use the example of working out, that you have to, in order to be motivated all the time, you have to enjoy that activity. But that's absolutely not true, because in the cases of the people that I know, even some of the most notable sports figures, a lot of them do not enjoy working out. They do not enjoy practice, but they never miss it. And so you don't have to enjoy it. Like part of my morning routine is, that I talk about habits, and first you create your habits and your habits create you. And I have a whole chapter on habits and how do you design habits, break old habits. Part of my morning ritual is I take a cold shower every freaking morning. And if you ask me if I enjoy it, No, I grew up in the Northeast. I hate the cold. I don't enjoy it, but I have a purpose for doing so. And that purpose I feel, because afterwards I feel great, right? After a workout, you feel great, right? But I'm clear, so I'm always motivated. And so the goal for purpose is to ask yourself the question, let's say your book, is to allow yourself to feel the consequences of doing it and not doing it. Allow yourself to feel what's good and also what could be painful, because pain could be a great motivator if you allow yourself to feel it. Like, who's missing out because you aren't doing this thing? Who's counting on you to be healthy so that so they could, so you could walk them down the aisle on their wedding, right? Like, allow yourself to feel that pain.
Yeah, it's interesting because like working out is a great example. Like everybody, I hate working out, and I always tell myself, "Oh, I can't do it. I don't have enough energy to do it." But and then there's two possible motivators, and one is a lot of people work out in order to look better, and that's an important motivator, and so on. But that never was quite the motivator for me. But one thing is, as I get older, is I do want to have a high quality older age.
Mm-hmm.
I want to, when I'm 80 years old, I don't want to be, hunched over and sick all the time and whatever. I want to have a healthy lifespan, or health span, as it's called. And so that's an important motivator for working out.
And that's good. So the first part of the formula is the P is having a purpose, because if you don't have a purpose, not just know the reasons intellectually, but allow yourself to feel it, you won't do it. Like, I know taking ice baths, like people see me on Instagram, like going into a tub of ice for 5 minutes. Like, in the moment though, I'm all for bringing joy to it though. Like, if it's between working out and enjoying it and working out and not enjoying it, enjoy it if you can. Like, get yourself pumped up and do what you have to do in your mind to really enjoy the process. But I'm just saying it's not a requirement, because there are many people who don't like doing something, but they do it. Like, just think about their jobs. How many people are dissatisfied with their jobs, but they're motivated to go to work every single day, even though they don't enjoy it. So so enjoying is not part of the equation, but add it in if you can. You might as well enjoy it if you're going to do it anyway. And if you don't love what you do, then at least find the love in, if you don't love what you're doing, then try to find, something what you're doing that you love, right? So at least you could make the best out of it. So that's purpose, but it has to be feeling based, because I always tell people, reasons reap results. If you don't have a reason to remember someone's name, if you don't have a reason to work out, if you don't have a reason for reading a book a week, it's just not going to happen, right? Allow yourself to feel it. That's purpose. Now, so this whole area that we do a whole chapter on finding your purpose and, discovering and allowing yourself to feel it, exercises. Now, what's the E? I went back in this thought experiment. I was like, okay, we're building the ultimate motivated human being. Motivation never falters. If this person has enough purpose, are they always going to be motivated? Is there any time when they're not going to be motivated? Any exception to the rule? And I say, yes, if they're lacking the E. The E stands for energy, meaning that somebody can be motivated to work out and they could feel the benefits of working out. They want, greater lifespan and a greater health span, and they want to live to 80 and that not only add years to their life, but life to their years. They could feel it and still not do it because maybe they have a newborn and it's kept them up 2 nights in a row, or maybe they're so freaked out because what's going on in the world, it's messing up their sleep, and they just, they have a reason and a purpose, but they don't have the energy to get to the gym.
So I should kill the baby.
But no, what you want to do is, you don't want to throw out the baby, but what you want to do is optimize your vitality. So in the book, we talk about things that you and I have talked about in the past on how to optimize your mental vitality. Everything from the food you eat to managing your stress, to optimizing we do a whole chapter on sleep, because if you don't have the energy, you could have a purpose for reading a book a week, right? We know the average person reads maybe 3 books a year. Imagine reading a book a week, 52 books a year. What a huge advantage you have. You have like a PhD in any subject, right? And let's say you have enough purpose, but you ate really crappy that day and you're in a food coma. You can't get yourself to read because you don't have the energy. So that's why energy is an important factor here. So optimizing your energy, and there are 10 things I talk about in the book to optimize your energy, mental energy. So you don't have brain fog and decision fatigue and all these things. Finally,
what's the most important one?
What's that?
What's the most important one
Out of all those?
For energy,
sleep. Yeah. I would say you could eat a crappy diet, but if you're not sleeping, and I know this is personal experience, traveling internationally. Even this year, I was in 3 continents in like 1 week. When your sleep gets jacked, you don't have the energy to do anything. And so here's the thing. So now you have purpose, you have energy. My thought experiment back to make this, ultimate motivated machine. I was like, okay, if the person has enough purpose, they feel it, they know their reasons, and they have enough energy, are they always going to be motivated? And I was like, no. There's one case I could think of in my 3 decades of doing this where they still won't take action. And that is if they lack the small steps. Meaning a lot of people, they have their goal, and their goal is, I want to create the next $1 billion brand, right? I want to find my soulmate and live happily ever after. I want that perfect 6-pack abs. And that's way too big. And so if a goal is too big or confusing or intimidating, you won't be motivated, because a confused mind doesn't do anything. So S3 stands for small, simple step, meaning that is the question I ask, what is the smallest action I could take to make progress for my goal that is so small I can't fail? What is the smallest step? Because that small step requires little effort and little energy. And a lot of people, again, they're not motivated because it's too big a thing or too confusing a thing or too intimidating a thing. So how do you break it down into small, simple steps? Let's take reading. Maybe it's not you trying to read a book a week. Maybe it's today, I just want to open the book. That's a small, simple step, opening up a book. Anybody could do that. Or maybe it's reading one sentence. Or maybe it's not working out and doing my cross. Maybe it's just getting my shoes on. Or maybe getting to the gym is a small, simple step.
Or I'll give another example that because I firmly believe in the small, simple steps approach, is that let's say you have an idea for a business. Let's say you have an idea for an app. You could kind of spec out, what does the front page look like for the app?
Mm-hmm.
What does the second page look like? What's the main transaction or function that happens in the app? You could spec it out. It's even a small step. You could upload it to freelance.com where there's freelance programmers, and you could see who wants to, you could see how much it costs and how fast. It almost requires no time at all. And then suddenly you could make a quick decision to build this app, and you've taken almost no time and spent no money.
Exactly. And if whether it's an app or it's you want to write that book and it's always been inside of you, and just write for 5 minutes, like write for take out
content.
Exactly. Start with, and then so it's a small, simple step. And the phrase, which is cliche, but a lot of cliches have a lot of truth to it. Inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, way too hard. Right? You just break it down. And then you also piggyback on a memory principle called the Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect is this psychologist, her last name is Zeigarnik. She's at a cafe. She goes every day to have her tea, and she noticed that the waitstaff would remember everyone's order there until that order was delivered. And once the waitstaff delivered the order, they have zero recollection of what that person ordered. And she called it the Zeigarnik effect, basically saying that your mind doesn't like open loops. Like, it's kind of like how people binge watch. He's using this time to binge watch all these shows. They're watching every single show possible on their favorite, entertainment platform, because at the end they open up a loop. And the brain's like, okay, just one more episode. And then all of a sudden it's like 3 a.m., and then that's what happens. The brain doesn't like those open loops and it wants to close it. And so the Zeigarnik effect is basically once you start something, you're more likely to finish that thing. And it gives you some positive momentum with little. You've seen those dominoes, right? You hit a little domino and it hits over another domino, and all of a sudden it's knocking down like something like a 10-foot,
So in this situation with the waitress, though, like, is she, because she closed the loop by handing in the order, that it flushes from memory?
So the intention behind the understanding the intent behind the Zeigarnik effect, how it was named after, is just what happens is somebody asks for an order, and that opens up this loop, and it doesn't close that loop until the order is actually delivered, and then there's no reason to be able to hold on to it. The Zeigarnik effect here, in terms of productivity, is saying start somewhere. Start anywhere, but just start somewhere. Because if you start something, you're more likely to finish it because of the Zeigarnik effect, because you want to close that loop.
I've never heard it called that, but it's very interesting because let's say I have 4 podcasts in a day, which is like an insane thing to do, but I've done it in the past. usually what happens is, and I've always wondered about this, after I do the first podcast, or let's say the second podcast, I actually cannot remember
Yeah.
who was on my podcast just even a half hour earlier. I can't remember anything. And it must be that same
It
effect. And I've always thought it was because now my mind is now focused on the next podcast I have to do, that maybe I flushed it from RAM before I got into the ROM,
right, and part of it
before I
has
got into the long memory.
exactly, and part of it has to do with intention also as well. Knowing that you are recording this in different formats and everything, they call it digital dementia. It's just like when you put a phone number in your phone, you don't have to actively recall it because you know it's stored somewhere. You know that password is somewhere. You know it's on a Post-it note or in LastPass or something. So it's knowing that it's there, knowing that you're not required to be able to retain it. And so, but going back to the formula for ultimate motivation. P times E times S3. If you want to be motivated around something, know what that goal is, and then what's your purpose? How does it here mentally and also emotionally? Both with doing it and not doing it, the consequences, and then making sure you
It
have
has to be really sincere to you. You have to really believe it. Like for instance, again, I mentioned with working out, like it's more important to me to be healthy when I'm 80 than to look good when I'm 80.
right,
And
and it's different for
if
each
I thought
person.
my purpose was to look good, I would have failed.
Right. But some people, that the opposite motivates them. They're not doing
Right.
it for health reasons. They're doing it for vanity, and there's no right or wrong. Again, it's whatever.
Right.
If that happens to be an inherent value for you, one of the best ways to tap into your, a reason is to connect it to one of your important values. So going back to, what we talked about in the last episode, when you're cocooning and you want clarity, one of the ways of using your time is to clarify and self-reflect and asking yourself, what's most important to me in life? And if you know that the most important things in your life are love, growth, contribution, adventure, then to the degree you could tie your behavior around those values, when I said, are your actions aligned with your values, then you don't have to motivate yourself because it's inherent, right? You have this intrinsic motivation because it's tied to something that you hold dear already. And so some people, their values are significance in how they appear. So if that's your value, then tie your behavior around that value, and you'll have this unlimited drive because that's the core of what's important to you. And so that's motivation. And then the final M, you have mindset, motivation. The final M are the methods, right? And so the methods are the strategies. And in the book, we talk about we do 5 chapters, 1 chapter on each what I call forms of superpowers, meta learning. So we do a chapter on focus because I think that's a superpower now. I think we do a chapter on study methods, studying technical material for retention and comprehension. We do a chapter on memory, which is the largest chapter of the book, and we do a chapter on speed reading, and then a chapter on critical thinking skills. But I feel like if I was to imbue somebody, a modern day, entrepreneur, creative, parent, whatever form, student, I would imbue them with those 5 superpowers, and they are going to be unstoppable. Because today, learning, your ability to learn and adapt, where whole industries just disappeared and businesses disappeared, and you have to relearn a new trade and skill and expertise. I think that's very important now. Now here's the magic. You have these 3 intersecting circles where mindset and motivation intersect. That crossover, I'm going to give you 3 I's. That crossover is inspiration. So you have mindset books, great book called Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. You have mindset speakers. You have motivational books and motivational speakers, motivational events. And where they cross over, you have inspiration. You have inspirational speakers, inspirational books, inspiring movies, right? Where mindset crosses over with methods. You believe everything is possible in your mind, and you know in your mind what to do, the methods. Then that's ideation. Because it's just an idea. You believe this is possible, and you know what to do, the methods, but you're ideating. You're not executing, right? Because you lack the motivation. And where motivation crosses over with methods, you're motivated and you know what to do, the method, that's implementation. But you could still be locked in that box because you're only going to be able to produce what you believe is possible, your mindset, and what you believe you deserve. So somebody can be motivated to to find that person they want to date. They even could have read books on methods to meet, somebody and cultivate a relationship and make it amazing and get married or whatever that book happens to be on methods. But they're only going to be able to achieve what they believe they deserve and what they believe that they're capable of, right? And so the reason I wrote this book is because primarily, people don't know this was a textbook, all methods. The book was completely how to read faster, remember facts, figures, foreign languages, name, image, trace, all this stuff. But then I said, like, hey, if somebody found this book on this, somewhere, would they get the result? That was my question. And I'm like, yeah, about 20% of them would. Why don't the other 80%? Because knowledge alone is not power. Knowing what to do is not enough because common sense is not common practice. Then I went, what's missing? Mindset, motivation. Now, where mindset, motivation, and methods all cross over, where ideation, implementation, inspiration all cross over, and that sweet spot in the middle, that's the fourth I, which is integration. Integration, like integral, it's making whole, right? It's just who you are, and that's where you're fully integrated. That's the limitless state. And so my suggestion, my recommendation, my plea to everyone who's listening is to think of an area where you feel held back, you're not making progress, and now this becomes a framework or a tool for you to overlap and saying, where's my challenge here? Is it in my mindset? And do I not believe it's possible? Do I not believe I'm capable of it? Do I not believe I deserve it? Is it in my motivation? Do I not know the reason or purpose why I'm doing this? Or the cost if I don't do this? Am I not feeling it? Is it my energy level? Do I do not have enough energy? Am I not? And look at my sleep and my diet and my stress and energy vampires in my life and all these things, my clean environment, everything. Or is it too big in my head? Do I need to break it down into small, simple steps? Or is it the process that I'm using? Maybe I have the right mindset and I'm really motivated, but I'm using old techniques for starting a business or investing or, finances or dating or rote repetition, sub-vocalization, all the bad learning habits. And so in the book, I teach you more updated methods to be able to, specifically to be able to learn.
I just want to say, I really like, again, the small steps aspect, because I think people don't realize that a skill, most skills that people think are skills are not really skills, but an aggregation of sub skills. So take, I don't know, golf. Okay, I don't golf, so I might get this all wrong, but golf, there's when you first hit the ball for the long drive, and then there's putting, then there's, getting out of a sand trap, and I don't know, there's like probably, or business is a good one. There's no such skill as business. There's sales, there's negotiation.
Right. And even those you could break down, you could break down sales even smaller and micro it also. Right. I agree that it's not, it's these macro skills, but it's actually made up of micro. Like I work with these kids that are just amazing, right? And, like I remember growing up and my parents like saying that, oh, why are you playing video games? You never can make a living playing video games. But like these kids are doing really well playing in coliseums of video games, but they've broken it down to these micro skills as literally switching off from button to button. Like they will practice that micro skill like all day. And then it's a set of skills. And then you put those little subset skills into big, sets of skills.
I think this is always underestimated. People, like, I don't know, whatever you want to do. Let's say you want to be a magician. There's the skill of, manipulating things with your fingers. Then there's kind of the performance skill, like the aha. Then there's then there's learning all the different tricks, which is just and memorizing them, which is just a different skill. All these skills are mutually exclusive, but together it's magic.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
So what in terms of the methods? I was curious when you said critical thinking. How do I improve the critical thinking?
So here's the reason why. We'll start with the reason why is because nowadays, so I opened the book with the 4 digital supervillains, like the horsemen of the apocalypse, this apocalyptic, the age of where we're and something, right? And so these horsemen are digital deluge, too much information, too little time. So that's why we teach speed reading and study. Digital distraction, which is why we spend a chapter on focus. Digital dementia, which is outsourcing our brains to our smart devices, so we're not getting, remembering anything. So that's why we do a chapter on focus. And then the fifth chapter, the fourth horseman that we take care of the fifth superpower, is digital deduction. And digital deduction is a term I just coined because they're finding that children do not have the analytical ability of previous generations because of technology. Because if you're relying on technology to tell you what to think or how to think, then you're not having to think for yourself. And so everything is being spoon-fed for us, like through technology and media and everything else, even GPS. We don't have to think, work on our visual, spatial, location intelligence. Even have you ever gotten into an Uber car? They just literally, it's an easy trip, but they're following some distorted app, and they're just like going way out of their way because they never have to execute their own sense of deduction and reasoning and critical thinking. So we do a whole chapter on that because I think out of all the chapters, it's one of the most important. Sure, speed reading, yes, memory, all that's very important. Focus, absolutely, how you can get things done without focus and concentration. But how do you make good decisions? How do you solve problems? What's a process for doing that? And school teaches you what to learn and what to think, but not how to learn and how to think. Like, we're not taught how to solve our own problems. At best, people here are pros and here's some cons, right? And that's how they make their decision. But what keeps us locked in a certain framework is getting the same result every single time, is looking at a problem from the same perspective every single time. And so because we have a certain predilection towards one point of view, that we attack that problem every single time with that point of view. So that way you always make the same investments. You always date the same kind of person. You always eat the same kind of things for your wellness or lack thereof, right? And so in the book, I go through a number of mental models of frameworks, how you can look at the world in a different way, which forces a different point of view. Let me give you an example. I want everyone right now to think about a decision that you have to make. All right, a problem that you have that doesn't have to be a life-threatening thing, but something that's just, something you need to make a decision on that you've been procrastinating, or something that either a decision you have to make or a problem you have to solve. So think about it so it has substance to you. In the book, I go through many different mental models and frameworks for making good decisions. And basically, let me highlight one of them. One of them is called 6 Thinking Hats, and credited to Edward de Bono. And basically, the idea here is the same as I've stated, is that sometimes we can't get out of our own way, that we tend to repeat things over and over again because we have the same thought processes that started the thing, aren't going to be the same process that get us out of that thing. So for example, with 6 Thinking Hats, it's a way of giving yourself permission to see something from a different point of view. So here's the example. Edward de Bono says there are 6 hats, and each of these hats are a different color. And as you're thinking about this problem, I'm going to walk you through, imagine putting this hat on. And when you put this hat on, this imaginary hat, you can't anymore see this problem or situation or decision through the same lens as you currently do. You have to see it through these glasses or this hat. And we'll learn by doing it. And because I'm a memory guy, I'm going to give you a mnemonic trick to remember all 6 colors. So the first one, no specific order, is the white hat. When you put on the white hat is your logical point of view. And so you have to make your decision or look at this problem through the lens of information, facts, data, okay? And the white hat, to remind you of that, is a scientist's white lab coat. That's to remind you when you're wearing that white hat, you go into science mode. There's no emotions. You're just looking at the facts. So you look at it and go assess this decision or this situation, this problem, just from a factual, logical standpoint.
Is there a chance you can get confirmation bias in terms of what facts you choose to?
Of course. Yeah, we could absolutely. And we could go down a rabbit hole, certainly. So that's the white hat. And now take off the white hat, set it down, and actually do this. Just imagine you're grabbing the red hat and you put on the red hat. Now you're no longer that logical person because you're not wearing that white hat. You're not capable of logic. When you put on the red hat, the red is all feelings. You have to look at the situation. Maybe you're looking at a relationship and, like, should you continue this relationship, start a new, whatever it happens to be. We're just being fictitious. The white hat is like the logical one. Who's the person that I should be with? The red hat, what do you feel? Logic, information, data aside, what does your heart say? And that's where you get touched in, because some people make decisions all red hat without ever looking at it like from a white hat standpoint, right? So red is like a memory trick, is red like the heart, emotions, right? Just to help you remember it. Take off the red hat, great. Now you're going to put on the yellow hat. And the yellow hat is the optimistic hat. I'm being like, and I'm giving this a gross summary. I go way more detail inside the book. The yellow hat is the optimistic hat. This is everything that could go right? You can't see what could go wrong. You're just looking at the upside of things. And so and just to remind you of it, it's like white, like the yellow, like the sun, the warmth of the sun, just possibility. This is amazing. Everything is good. Everything could go right? That's the yellow hat. You take off the yellow hat and then you put on the black hat. Now the black hat is the critic. All right. So this is perfect. Imagine a judge who's going to judge, and the judge's robes are black. So when you put on the black hat, you go into judgment mode, and you go into critic mode. You go into what could go wrong here, where it's not necessarily where you're pessimistic, but you're basically looking at the risk that's involved. Where's all the downside on this investment or in this relationship? All the things that could go wrong. That's the black hat, the black judge, or the critic, right? The critic's robe. And then finally, as we go through, we went through the next hat is the green hat. The fifth hat is the green hat. And now when you put on the green hat actually is possibilities. It's creativity. The green hat is newness. And really, this is like out of the box thinking. The green hat is a memory trick. A memory mnemonic would be green like grass. It grows, right? New growth. And so this would be your creativity hat, is like, what am I not thinking about right here? Maybe it's not, I live here, or maybe it's not, I take this job an hour away, or I go back, or I take this job for less pay. Maybe the green hat is, I go back to school, something new that can meet that intention. That's growth, right? Growth like green plants. And then finally, the sixth hat, take off the green hat, you put on the blue hat. And the order doesn't matter, except the blue hat is last, because the blue hat is the manager hat. The blue hat listens to what all the other hats had to say, and with an open mind, and overviews everything, reviews everything that everyone, all the other hats had to say, and then makes the final decision. And blue, like blue skies, it overviews everything, right? And then it listens to everybody, and then it makes a decision. And the reason why it's going to be a better decision, or it's going to help you to solve that problem better, is because what keeps us locked in is one point of view. Everybody listening to this usually has a dominant hat that they go to. They're always the critic. They just like all the things that could go wrong. That's their mindset 90% of the day. Or they're the logical one. They're like Data or Spock, right? They're like, they look at everything Data. Or they're the emotional person. Everything is emotional. But this gives you 6 different points, or at least 5 different points of view, and you have a more enriched understanding of the problem or the situation. You could course correct a little bit easier. And this is great whether you're an individual going through this thought experiment, or if you have a team. Right? If you have a team of 5 or 6 or 10 people, it's like, everybody, all right, everyone put on the white hat together. All right, let's talk about it from a white hat perspective. Or give everybody separate hats, put it, in a hat, like different colors, and let everyone pick a different hat. And then we argue from that point of view, or we have a good discussion at that point of view. And the person who has a blue hat listens to everything and helps to, bring that to bear. So that's one tool that we teach in the critical thinking section, that I feel like sometimes we're not using these faculties. And it's one of the most important things, because again, where jobs are going to automation and AI is, how do you think creatively? How do you solve problems? How do you make better decisions?
I think that's important too. And another way in which it's important, that type of critical thinking and using those types of that hat, the hat method, is we're also in a world where everybody's increasingly polarized. So there's red states and there's blue states, but there's no yellow or green states. There's nothing in the
Mhm.
middle. And you either like red people or you like blue people, but you're not allowed. If you're blue, you're not allowed to like red, and if you're red, you're not allowed to like blue. So we've become this polarized culture, and I think it's helpful to really be able to argue things from the other person's point of view just as good as they can. Because otherwise, how do you really know what the full complexity of a problem or a decision? Like nothing's ever simple. If 50 million people believe one thing and 50 million people believe another thing, that's kind of an indicator that it's a complex problem. So it's useful to kind of avoid that sort of polarized groupthink.
I agree. It's one of the, I think these tools are like having your mental toolbox. It's better than having a default, where we just default to whatever we happen to be
Mm,
thinking or feeling in that moment.
that's a good point. And well, let me ask you a question. In terms of learning, how important is obsession?
Define obsession.
Well, like for instance, I'm I'm gonna limit myself right now. I'm not very good at languages.
Hmm.
And it's because I have no motivation to learn another
Right.
language. Like I really just don't want to put in the time, the effort. And fortunately, most of the world, or not most, I shouldn't say that. It's English centric, but a lot of the world speaks
Right.
English, and I've gotten by this long just knowing English. And if suddenly I got obsessed with learning Spanish or learning some other language, I probably would be able to learn it. Like I feel that I can only learn things really well when I'm obsessed with it, when I'm willing to put in those extra hours because I love something so much. Like I'll learn poker or something like that because I'll get obsessed with it and I'll learn all the statistics and I'll read every book. But you have to be obsessed. You can't force yourself to do it. I mean, I guess it's related to motivation, but it's motivation for me. It has to tip into the area of obsession.
Yeah, depending on how we define it, it would definitely fall in that area. We know that obviously you c- I have a belief that we could do almost anything, but we can't do everything. And so obsession has to do with focus and narrowing and doing that deep work, that, Cal Newport and like all these people
Yeah.
talk about the deep practice. And obviously, if you build an obsession, and it's built around like, if you fall in love with somebody who happens to just speak that language and you go there and you travel, you appreciate the art that's there and the food and everything, you get obsessed and you go deep, then with little distraction. And obviously that person's going to learn better than a person who just has a general interest about something. Always know that this is the great thing about this is all personal and individual for for that individual, meaning that with everything that we're talking about, what motivates one person doesn't motivate the other person, right? And the things
Right.
that give some people energies doesn't give other people energy. Everything is differently weighted because we are still individual. And so I would say certainly if somebody has a higher level of commitment, a higher level of focus, a higher level of drive, then they're going to get, more, everything else being equal, they're going to get better results, certainly, because they're not the opportunity cost, their focus isn't split on something else somebody else is doing. Right. They're not trying
Right.
to do two or three things. Usually somebody who is obsessed, their dominant thoughts, their dominant habits, everything, their goal is a vision, their mind wanders towards that thing all the time. And they're singularly focused on something. So yeah, they would definitely learn something better.
And in terms of finding purpose, what's like one or two tips you can give people just to leave off where someone could go in the direction of like because a lot of people wonder how do I find my purpose, particularly young people, or let's say right now we're in a situation where 20 million people might have been just laid off from their jobs and they want to figure out what their next purpose or sometimes it's called passion, what it is.
In the book, I make a distinction between a lot of words, because I feel like words have meaning. And similar to when people interchange words like nice and kind, which people think it has the same meaning, but when you actually look it up, it has a very different meaning. That somebody at the grocery store that's checking you out online, the cashier, they could be nice to you, but that doesn't mean they care about you, at all. But somebody could be nice or placate to you, not be invested in you, and not go out of their way to be able to serve you, as opposed to somebody who's kind. like somebody who genuinely is coming from that place where it doesn't matter. They're focused on that person's care. They're vested there. So I think words, they're subtle. For me, passion functionally, and people could define it however they want. I choose to define passion as something that lights me up. And it doesn't require, like, people think maybe you only can have one passion or one purpose, or you have one fated purpose in life. That's not what I choose to believe, because again, these are choices, not what's true. It's what I choose to believe that serves me. And for me, I have lots of different passions. And so, and I think passion comes from novelty. I think everyone should try everything a few times. Like, and we've talked about this before, once to, get over the fear of something, another, do it again to try to get decent at it, do it again to see if you like it or not, because maybe it doesn't light you up. I think a lot of people who say they're burnt out, when you really dialogue with them, they're not really burnt out because they're doing too much. They're burnt out because they're doing too little of the things that light them up, the things that they're passionate about. Really, and so, whether your passion is chess, or if it happens to be video games, or it happens to be writing, I think we can have multiple passions. Like so passion for me is what lights me up. Purpose is how I could use that passion to light somebody else up. So I have a passion for learning, and my purpose is teaching other people how to learn. And so that's how I reconciled the two. I don't think you have to take your passions and necessarily turn it into your purpose, because I have lots of passions, but I don't necessarily want to make it my purpose in life. And I also don't think we have one just set purpose in life. My dominant purpose, when it comes to my career, is building better, brighter brains, no brain left behind, and that drives me as part of my purpose when it comes to the formula P times E times S3, that even when I was lacking sleep because I had very severe sleep apnea, which I talk about in the book, where I was sleeping like 90 minutes a night, and and then traveling, flying on, going on intercontinents and sleeping. When you're a memory expert and you wake up and you don't realize what city you're in, then there's an issue. And so, that drove me to do, even back in school, it drove me to study all that time, put in extra hours, because I was so clear on my purpose to make my parents proud. That was my, for right or for wrong, that was my purpose. And so I think that you could have multiple passions. And when let's say if you're parenting, I would say, like, give your kids a breadth of experience and see where, their attention goes, right? Give them enough novelty and stimulus to see what grabs their interest. And then I think that passion really is built, just like in a relationship, that you don't, you date and you give yourself novelty and you see where your heart or your mind goes, right? And then you build that relationship. I think same thing with passion. You give yourself enough novelty and see what you feel drawn to. And it's who's to decide what's right or what's wrong. You could have one passion, you could have, 20 different passions,
So what about purpose? Like, what would be a good kind of exercise, or how do I play around with purpose?
So purpose for me, again, is taking something that I'm passionate about and then turning it into a way of serving. And so for me, I found it through my passion is public speaking. My passion is learning. I take a bunch of my passions. My passion now is a little bit with storytelling. I wrap as many of my passions together for one singular purpose that I'm not saying you can't have more than, it's context dependent. Like in my career, my purpose is to build better brains. Right. But I also have a purpose in terms of me as a intimate partner. Right. And lighting her up. Right. What lights me up and what lights her up. What for my, being a son of immigrant parents, like I have a purpose, in terms of family. So I think purpose be context dependent. Now, I feel like it's amazing if you could take something you're great at, your power, right, and have something that is also something you can make profitable, in terms of business, and something that you are passionate and purposeful around, because then it's like, it's an ultimate hat trick, right? Because then you're good at it and you enjoy it and you can make it profitable. And see, if I make the Venn diagram around passion, power, and profit, I feel like that would be something, because then I would think in my mind, I'm just talking out loud about this with you, that let's say if you're passionate about something and you're powerful at it, you're good at it, but you can't make it profitable, that's kind of tough to make, that.
It's sort of like, like we last hung out before this. We were watching Game of
Right.
Thrones, and that obviously, so a TV show is something that many people were very passionate about. You could be powerful because you could know every
Yeah.
detail and all the little Easter eggs and so on in there, and the script details and the behind the scenes. But it's probably hard to make your passion in Game of Thrones profitable.
Yeah,
It's probably not impossible, by the way, but it's
exactly.
hard.
And then some people do, they created like these online, like, after buzz kind of conversations. They got joint venture partners. I mean, everything is possible there. But then that sweet spot, that would be a great purpose for me. But then you could be powerful at something and it could be a profitable business, but you're not passionate about it. You don't enjoy it. Doesn't light you up. That, I don't know how sustainable that is. That's like going to something that you're good at and it's profitable, but you're not happy about it. Or you could have something you're passionate about and it could be profitable, but you're not good at it. And, you don't have the power, but then that's where skill development and your study and deep work come into place. But I think where all that comes together, if you could turn that into a purpose where, it's your passion, that's what I've done, right? I have my passion about learning and I've gotten really good about learning and I made it into a business that's profitable. And so that fills me up for my purpose. So I don't have to be like pushed.
So Jim Kwik, I always learn so much from you, and also every time we talk, I know the downloads go through the roof because there's so much people are learning from the master of learning, Jim Kwik. It's like you're this brain superhero, and in fact, that's why you've been coached to so many Hollywood superheroes. You've worked with all the X-Men actors. Stan Lee, you mentioned on this podcast, Will Smith, but there's so many great quotes and blurbs in your book from everybody ranging from, Simon Sinek, who you mentioned, to Maria Shriver, Beth Comstock, who was the former vice chairman of GE. So much praise for the book, but the book is Limitless, Upgrade Your Brain, Learn Anything Faster, and Unlock Your Exceptional Life. And I will say this is such an important thing in today's day and age where I think that we're going to start to blur the distinction between certification, like getting a degree, and actual skills, where you actually have the skills to do something. And I think employers or investors or whatever, they were always looking at degrees in the past as a good filter to kind of shortcut making a decision about who to hire or who to invest in or whatever. But I think they're not going to be able to do that anymore. The role of college is changing. And the role of validation and degrees and certification is changing. I think people are going to have to demonstrate actual skill, and you have to build the meta skills to learn skills, and that's what this book is so great at, and what you've always been great at. So, Limitless by Jim Kwik, such a great book, such an honor once again to talk to you, Jim. I always learn so much. And you have to keep coming back on the podcast. Don't ever lose track of us.
I need to have you actually on my show too. So I want to thank you for this. And people ask about where to get the book. They could go to limitlessbook.com, and we have so many great. We have a book club that's free and everything that comes with your purchase of the book, because I want this to be the most read book that you have on your shelf and the most applied book. And so I'm going to do everything I can to help you to apply the book, remember the book, use the book. And it's kind of like, you remember like the Lord of the Rings, where it's like one ring that rules them all. This is the one book that will help you learn them all. You read this book and help you learn every other book past this better.
I believe it. And this is again, this is an important topic now. Like I'm seeing more and more kind of people talking about this issue. Like, how can I learn something really fast? I mean, even in the Instagram live I just did, people were asking this question. Well, if I'm 45 and I was just laid off, how do I, is it too late for me to learn any skill? And the reality is it isn't, as you show in this book, Limitless, that it really is possible, no matter what your age, no matter what your circumstances. In most cases, it's possible to learn these skills that you thought you couldn't. And it's through these sort of meta learning techniques and absorbing them. And it really is a shortcut, not a shortcut, but it really is our tools for learning just about anything. And it's so important right now in this society.
I think
It's called your book coming out at the
Yeah, I
perfect
think
time.
knowledge is power, learning is our superpower. And if there was a genie that could grant you any one wish, but one wish, you would ask for infinite wishes. And if I was your learning genie, I could grant you any one learning wish to help you become a master at any one subject or skill. What would the equivalent be of asking for infinite wishes? What skill or subject? It'd be learning how to learn. Because if you can learn how to learn, you can grant your own wishes. You could apply that towards management, money, marketing, Mandarin, martial arts, music, everything in your life gets sweeter.
You realize you just said all M
Oh, yeah.
words?
I like
You're so good with like consonants, alliteration,
exactly.
mnemonics, and acronyms, rhyming. You have all these like techniques to make things just flow in the
The
brain.
book, it's
But
interesting because it's like when you read it, you're going on an adventure, and it's not only teaching you accelerated learning, it's set up and structured in a way that you learn it faster also as well. And there's 2 bonus chapters also when you go to limitlessbook.com and order it there. I give you
I'll
a
just check it out.
chapter, a digital chapter on Limitless for parents to help your kids apply this model towards your kids in education. So great for teachers and parents. And Limitless for teams, how to apply this Limitless model towards a collective culture, a learning organization, whether you have 3 people
I'm gonna have to check
or
this out.
3,000.
I have 5 kids and 5 teenagers, so it'll be interesting. I'm gonna have to learn that because I haven't been following it probably. But
I challenge everybody who's listening to take a screenshot of this episode, tag James, tag myself at Jim Kwik on social media, and post your big aha. And I'll actually gift out a signed copy of this book to one person. But I believe when you teach something, you get to learn it better. And so take a screenshot, tag James, tag myself, so we see it. I'll repost some like I always do, but then share what's a big takeaway. If there's one idea you got out of this, maybe share it with your friends and your followers so they can benefit also as well.
Well, Jim, thanks so much. And the book is called Limitless. Let me read the subtitle again because I always mess it up. Limitless, Upgrade Your Brain, Learn Anything Faster, and Unlock Your Exceptional Life by Jim Kwik, forward by Mark Hyman, MD. And of course, Will Smith at the top saying, Jim Kwik knows how to get the maximum out of me as a human being. That's great that you got that. Well, Jim, once again, thanks so much. I really appreciate it, and good luck.
Thanks, buddy.